I am Anders Hagstrom with the Daily Caller. Welcome to your Wednesday morning dispatch. With me today is our reporter, Bradley Devlin. Thank you so much for coming on, Brad.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so let's just hop right in. We've got a story coming out of Ohio. Senator Mike Lee, I mean, he's a mainstay. Everybody who follows politics knows who Senator Mike Lee is. He is taking Amazon to task on a defense project. Now, I mean, in 2019, the JEDI, J-E, it's an acronym, JEDI, defense project, it's a cloud computing contract coming from the Pentagon. It was given by the Trump administration to Microsoft. We thought it was a done deal at the time, but over the last few weeks, we've heard that the Pentagon under President Biden has reneged on that contract. They said, no, we're going to go back to looking between either Amazon or Microsoft. Now, Mike Lee is sort of a little suspicious about Amazon's handling of this contract and handling of the negotiations of this contract. So he's opening up an investigation into how they've been negotiating for this contract. Brad, what are the specifics here? What's been going on?
Yeah, and the reason for this new investigation, right, is because there was newly released emails that showed Sally Donnelly, former senior advisor to former Trump Defense Secretary James Mattis, for praising Bezos as a genius of our age and mentioning that Amazon hired many former intelligence agents. And Donnelly also mentioned that Bezos' ownership of the Washington Post gave him influence beyond the business world. And of course, Donnelly's consulting firm, SBD Advisors, had previously consulted for Amazon Web Services, AWS, in the past. And so the lawmakers previously had an investigation into this, but now these new emails from Sally Donnelly coming to the light is sparking new interest to see just how Amazon is able to, finagle their way into government contracts, because this became a large sticking point with regards to big tech censorship, where Tom Cotton made a speech on the Senate floor, I believe in February, that was about, if we want to get serious about taking on big tech, we ought to reconsider the way that our government does these contracts, because a large portion of these companies' profits, the reason that they're solvent, is because the U.S. government keeps giving them not only tax incentives as well as all sorts of regular business. They also give them massive government contracts that the American people don't necessarily know about. They aren't necessarily transparent about.
Speaking of massive government spending, we have some bad news about the deficit. It looks like this year's deficit, I mean, we've known Biden has been wanting to spend tons and tons and tons and tons of money. It's all of his legislative agenda pieces have like $1 trillion earmarks on them, which is incredible. It looks like this year's is going to be on pace for being the second largest in American history. Where is this money going, Brad? And where is this money going? That's the end of the question, really.
Yeah. Where is the money going? Well, I mean, the answer was to the next decade of coronavirus stimulus. I mean, we saw this when we were breaking down Biden's stimulus package, the second coronavirus stimulus package, also known as the American Rescue Plan, right? I mean, it had billions of dollars all the way tranched out until 2028. And possibly a little bit further than that for schools, right? Even though we know that the coronavirus isn't dangerous to children under the age of 18, and that we already had a working vaccine that was having positive clinical trials. So I mean, a vaccine that was already given emergency authorization use by the time Biden became president and the American Rescue Package was passed. Anyway, this amount of money is insane, and it's second only to last year, 2021, which was 2020, which was a $3.1 trillion deficit shortfall. And so this year we're on pace. Through the first 9 months of the fiscal year, we've racked up a $2.24 trillion deficit, and that is projected to come in just a little bit under 3.1 trillion at about a 3 trillion mark. But it depends on what other legislative agenda items Biden's able to get passed in these next few months. So we'll see exactly where it goes from here. But just for context, I mean, the largest deficit that we had prior to 2020 and 2021, prior to the coronavirus pandemic, was obviously in 2009 after the Great Recession, and that was a $1.4 trillion deficit. So we have answered crises by doubling the amount of money, it seems, that we're spending on them that we do not have.
Yeah, it's a pretty remarkable price tag, and I know looking at Biden's infrastructure bill, his American Families Plan, and obviously the already passed American Rescue Plan, the COVID aid. I believe it totals up to like something like 6.2 trillion. It's over 6 trillion. Obviously, not all of that would be deficit. There are ways of funding those bills within the legislation, but clearly they aren't covering the entire pieces of legislation. So it's incredible. The budget deficit has only one direction to go, and that's up at the moment. And obviously Republicans have sort of, I mean, traditionally back in like 2010 with the Tea Party, Republicans were all about fiscal responsibility. That's less so true today. I think you're not hearing Mitch McConnell freaking out very much about fiscal responsibility these days, and maybe that's a large part to do with the coronavirus and the willingness of Americans to sort of see these big price tags.
I mean, to be fair though, the Republican Party, I mean, has had quite a shift after the Trump years. But Reagan spent money just like Trump spent money. When you're in power, you want to spend money to get things done to please your voters. I mean, that's obviously how it works. But remember, Republicans were pretty stiff-handed when it came to coronavirus stimulus. Specifically in the first negotiation of the stimulus package, where Trump was actually the person who was saying, no, I want you guys to spend more money on this rescue package rather than less. So that was an interesting pivot. We saw some of that during the infrastructure battle, but not nearly as much, right? The fact that Republicans are even agreeing to go forward with like a $1 trillion infrastructure package is relatively surprising. It wouldn't be something that you saw during the Obama administration. But like Anders, if the U.S. government was a regular family household in the United States, right, a median income family makes about $68,000 per year in the United States. It would be spending $137,000 and putting $69,000 on the family's credit card while being almost $600,000 in debt. So we're talking about astronomical numbers that would not make sense at all in the real world, beyond a government entity dealing with this type of stuff. I mean, you can't compare this to anything else. Government spending is running amok not only in the United States but across the world.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely worrisome every time you think about it, but it seems like there no consequences ever seems to come about this, which has obviously been the sort of hammer hanging over the head of a lot of American politicians for a long time. Moving on to our last story here, we've got Ghislaine Maxwell. I mean, you'll remember of sexual crimes fame. She's trying to pull a Bill Cosby kind of, and in the good way, sort of. Where Bill Cosby sort of got out of prison just last week for a legal technicality. Essentially, he was released from Pennsylvania prison by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. Now, Ghislaine's lawyers are arguing the same thing should happen to her. Brad, is this argument at all relevant? Like, is there any way that this could possibly make any sense for her in terms of her specific case?
I mean, the Ghislaine Maxwell is a pretty interesting situation because this former attorney is very, very sure that it does apply, but I'm not 100% certain. All I know is that every single time something minorly unfortunate happens to Ghislaine Maxwell in prison, they're like, her and her attorneys make this big kerfuffle out of it. Remember her black eye? Like, she got a black eye. She can't be in prison anymore. Oh, Bill Cosby's free. That means Ghislaine Maxwell, should be free as well. And it's like, no, you're a scumbag. You've always been a scumbag. Bill Cosby's still a scumbag. Got lucky. So I hope that it doesn't apply because I want her to rot in jail for the rest of her life. I mean, maybe she can rot in jail for enough time for both her and Jeffrey Epstein, who
exactly. I mean, yeah. So what happened with Bill Cosby actually is that he reached a civil agreement with prosecutors. They essentially agreed not to force him to face prison time if he faced civil compensation for some of the accusations that he had against him. Eventually, that deal with the state was reneged on, and he was sent to prison anyway for the crimes that he was alleged to have committed, obviously like drugging women, that sort of thing. And the Pennsylvania Supreme Court said no, you have to abide by the deal made in civil court. You can't prosecute him after saying that you wouldn't prosecute him, and so he was released from court under those circumstances. Now, for Ghislaine, I don't think there's any past court case that she has worked with on the state on a civil level, anything like that. I don't think she's made any prosecutorial agreements that would protect her from being prosecuted for what she's currently being prosecuted for. So it's definitely an interesting argument. I think you're barking up the right tree where it's just like every time something remotely they could be remotely construed to be good for Ghislaine or sympathizing for Ghislaine. Her lawyers just run it up the flagpole and see who salutes. That's the sort of thing that we're seeing here.
Yeah, and that's the response that they're getting. Every single time they trot out something like this, everyone goes, "Well, you're talking about all this." Trying to be honorable before these civil or criminal court cases. Meanwhile, you're running out there to the media every single way that you can, and trying to build sympathy for your client. And so some people have said that the op-ed that he wrote is in violation of good court ethics. So, I mean, it's just going back and forth on this. I don't think, as you said, I don't think that there's a case that Ghislaine worked with authorities on, and also it's in the state of New York, not the state of Pennsylvania, so the precedent necessarily wouldn't even apply.
Exactly. Anyways, we will be keeping an eye on it and let you know as soon as possible if Ghislaine Maxwell actually gets out of prison. Anyways, enjoy the rest of your Wednesdays, Patriots. Thanks for watching.